Okay, great. Well, good morning. I appreciate everybody getting in here and joining us on the coveted 8 a.m. Time slot for the second day of the Hacker Conference. Yeah, there you go. We'll actually, post-production, we'll put lots of people in there and add sound effects, so everybody know. No, but this is my first Circle City Con, so I'm really glad to be here. My name's Bryan Fite. I'm here to talk about games, war games. We're actually, as I put it together for my paper, simulating cyber operations. It made it much more palatable to the corporate types. But we'll walk through just a little bit more about myself, kind of where I'm coming from. My journey, I go from the guy who used to say no to the guy that has to facilitate yes. And for anybody who's been in the information security business for a while, that's kind of the evolution. So, we wanted our seat at the table, and now we have it, and we actually have to help solve problems as opposed to breaking things, which is much easier. We just lost, I think they probably just fixed whatever was going on in the first session. So take two, or which we used to call hacker, consultant, did a stint as architect, policy, and now I actually work for a large telco as a innovations product manager in the cyber physical division, right? Which is the Internet of Dangerous Things. But okay. So I don't know how distracting this is going to be for you, because we do have some good slides, but I can actually talk through it. And I guess I'll get to make a judgment call here since I'm on my own. How would you guys like to do it? Would you like to pause? Okay. Well, this is a really nice cable. It's got to be something going on over there. Or there's somehow everything is connected. Yeah, okay. So technology is a wonderful thing. And she's laughing because none of the shit at my house works either. Absolutely. Cell strategy. Maybe okay, so if I don't allow it to stall too much. All right. So basically, what I want to talk about is what we perceive as a wicked business problem, and it's essentially a shortage of what we'll call cyber warriors. So I'm positing that I think there is a problem because there's not enough trained and experienced offensive, defensive computing experts. And I'll posit that playing games can help train and assess cyber warriors. And that's kind of important. So the training is one part, all sorts of training going on. We're having a little bit of, yeah, it's, there we go. Adrian! So whether you like the term cyber warrior or not, it plays well to certain audiences. The bottom line is there's not enough of us, and we think that playing games can help train. And I think there's a lot of training going on, but what's not probably as mature is the assessment piece of this. And if you talk to large organizations, be they corporate or government-based, that's one of the challenges they're having right now because they don't know if the people they're hiring or investing money in, where they're at in the maturity continuum. Yes, and that's part of the problem in the industry. You can get certified, but that doesn't mean you have experience or that you'll, be able to have a deep knowledge or be able to actually make something work when it is needed. You're going to lock us in? Lock us into a port. That's why experience is important, that have touched all the weirdness, all the weird machines, as Sergei Brakis would say. Yeah, it seems like that. So they lock us in the computer room. No whammies. Well, yeah, I'm not sure it's locking in. Every time I'm hitting the button, it's, yeah, see. Yeah. So, is it auto something? Dude, that'd be really awesome, right? Roll the dice. Brick the projector. Accept firmware update. You know, right as you push the button through, this is the wrong. Did I back? Let's wait. Let's just. Yeah. We're going to feel so accomplished once we lock it in there. It'll be a good feeling, good way to start the day. You can do it. All right, now we'll force in. Oh, this might be configured for. Sometimes how they'll configure the interface if it's hanging upside down or something. Okay, now I've just given it a signal. Let's see if it stays with us. Okay, so. Okay, so every time I advance the slides, so just bear with me. We'll put the slides up online. Okay. All right, so posit, shortage of cyber warriors, playing games can help train and assess. And the other problem that we have are there are a lot of games out there, simulations, whatnot, that few are fit for purpose for what we're trying to do. So if anybody's had an opportunity to play capture the flag games, anybody taken any? I think Sands has their Net Wars. There are just a myriad of. I mean, there's a game going on here that you can learn about and play. It's ongoing over the weekend, so I encourage everybody to check those out. But there's some challenges. One thing, like some of the best games ever played by the ghetto hackers, you burn people out. It takes a lot of time. DEF CON, awesome, capture the flag, but the problem is you commit 3 days, probably a year of your life, and you really don't get to socialize that much because you're out there competing. There are challenges with the challenges. So I recently wrote, not so recently, it was last year, basically a call to action to declare that I think what's needed is a publicly adopted cyber operations simulation standard. And this would be a way for these scenarios or elements of the games to move between all the different stakeholders because we're not advancing the science of this. There's lots of good art going on, lots of good simulations. The challenge is they're very proprietary. And so you could be the best capture the flag player, but if you went to play Packet Wars, there'd be no, wouldn't have a basis. Or if you're trying to assess cyber candidates that have certified on one platform, they may or may not be fit for purpose when they come in. You might have to retrain them. So it's really important that we have some kind of standardization if we want to use these platforms to do actual assessment. And that's the call to action. So this white paper is up. It's my second GSEC Gold certification. I really do, we were talking a little bit about certs. I do like the GSEC because it requires you, the Gold, because it requires you to kind of do some research. And it also gives you a forum for presenting content. So if any of you out there considering it, I don't work for them, but I do think it's a good program. All right, so war games. Is this a game or is it real? And then the Whopper Joshua says, well, what is the difference? So, okay, what is the difference? Well, we'll step back a little bit and talk about models and simulations. So, since the beginning of time, or way back in history, we wanted to understand the world around us, and the way we did that is to come up with models. And we can go back as far as, ancient cave paintings to show, this is how we see ourselves in the world around us. So models give us a point of reference to try to understand things that we might understand, but it's also our place in that environment. And of course, we have some really cool modeling stuff going now in the modern age. Human genomics, we've almost figured out all the building blocks, and I think that'll be the next wave of really cool hacking, will be basement hacking, doing your own DNA. We see that a lot right now. You talk about your PII living in the cloud. Some of these services that are out there for $100 that'll take some of your DNA and try to sort it out, find if you're predisposed to certain illnesses or things of that nature. It'll be very interesting. But again, this is all modeling, trying to understand how things work together and our place in the universe. Now, simulations are a little bit different. Simulations are kind of applying some of those models to test our theories or to improve some capability. So we often use the analogy of in hacking, testing, Kumite, hack your own network, attack your own network to learn how to defend, understand how your adversaries work. And so I think people generally accept that that's a good thing. Some of the reasons it's a good thing could be, if you're on horseback and you're using live ammunition or things like that, if your riding skills aren't very well, you could die in your training session. That would not be good. Also, spooking the horses or losing assets during those trainings would not be a good thing. It's not cost effective. It's not really sustainable. So we'll see people using simulators to teach some of the basics, to find out and assess if they are qualified to go to the next level of training, which might be more expensive. And once we do invest in these training simulations where somebody's gotten to the next level, you've invested a lot. You can move them up into the simulation to become more and more real, and that can be cost effective. Doesn't scale so much, but that's really what we're trying to do. So you don't want to put an unskilled cadet in a multi-million-dollar machine and lose the multi-million-dollar machine or other seasoned professionals. So there's an economic rationale for why you will do simulations. And we believe that also this has a lot of application in our modern world in cyber. It's not polite to hack your neighbors. It's probably illegal. So we need to build environments where we can do that. And we have constraints that some of our adversaries, especially criminals or possibly state-sponsored adversaries that don't necessarily have those same constraints. So it's important that we invest in these. So anybody have a lab in their basement and run tools against your own systems and things of that nature? Okay, and does it help you learn? And we're all we want to be when I talk about hacking, I say hack the art of the hack is not the crack. So if we're above board or, out here in the public, we have to be able to find the ways to hack systems without breaking the law. And that in itself can be a challenge. And so by building these simulated environments or playing games, that can give us an opportunity to do that and share knowledge, so move it out of the basement, maybe into more of the mainstream. And diversity is really good for the species, so the more that we involve other types of combatants in our simulations or enrich the simulations, we're going to have a better experience. So, and it can also be used as an outreach program. I'll talk a little bit about Packet Wars, which is the cyber sport that I'm involved in, and what some of the rationale of why we did it, and maybe this will resonate with you. All right, so you want this standard. You want to be able to share elements across the different platforms. You want to train and assess cyber warriors. So where do we start? Well, I think we've come up with kind of a innovative way to do that using a simulation definition language. An SDL, I know I couldn't come up with a better acronym, but it's descriptive. And essentially there's the main component are objects. So just to have a real good standard definition, objects, a collection of predetermined attributes that we use to describe the simulation element. So this is going to be the foundation for our models, modeling the universe that we want to emulate or simulate, and then we'll talk about the rules that govern those. And so the attributes, an object defines the simulation element, and then the attributes define the characteristics of that object. And then those rules will determine how they interact with each other. Make sense? Pretty straightforward, right? We use 9 primitives, and yeah, it could have been 7, it could have been 15. These seem to be the ones that pop up the most, and we could have a discussion, maybe offline tonight over beers or something, around some primitives can be considered other types, but we'll run through these. So we have the node primitives, and essentially this is either a single host or a gateway, typically, and they would define an endpoint. You have network elements. These are going to describe certain characteristics of the network, and this could be, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Could be custom protocols, something that doesn't exist today. Again, it's just an object to kind of help abstract some of these components. You have software primitives. These can be the operating system. They could also be applications. We'll have artifacts. Artifacts are cool. Anybody play crackmes? Familiar with crackmes? They're typically file, you reverse engineer them. They might have a flag or something inside. But they can also be messages. And sometimes we use them as, depending on which way the simulation's going. If we need to jazz things up or give somebody a hint, we'll typically let them discover an artifact in our simulations. Constraints are pretty important, and we'll talk about those, but if you had unlimited time, unlimited resources, right, somebody's eventually going to get in. But in the real world, you have constraints. You typically have deadlines. You might have skill set constraints. And so that is an important aspect of the simulation is putting those constraints in place and understanding the constraints. And some constraints for combatants should be obvious and communicated, and then some should be maybe covert, because whatever your objective is, you might not want people to understand that they're under constraint. Defining your constraint might be part of your objective. An objective, this is why we play. So why do we study? Why do we train? Well, we train to win, right? So in many of the games, capture the flag, retrieving the flag, or the keys are the objectives. But sometimes the objectives may just be understanding how people pick their targets. It was a really cool Air Force research project, and they were interviewing hackers at DEF CON, and they said, well, how are we going to get to talk to these hackers? And I said, well, just tell them you're Air Force researchers and you want to talk to hackers and have beer and have a hospitality suite. And, that's what they did. And so I think most hackers or researchers are more than happy to talk to people about what motivates them and things of that nature. So to me it was interesting because they really didn't care how people were doing things. They wanted to understand how they were choosing their targets, and were they opportunistic, or was there an end game in mind? And of course, actors are going to be the combatants in the game. These will be your adversaries, or sometimes using the Dungeons and Dragons kind of non-player characters. Process can actually be a type of application. It can be a script. It could be a human-oriented process. And then the messages, these can be directions that you embed inside of an artifact. They can be the instructions that you give to actors. They can take all sorts of different forms. So with these basic 9 building blocks, we can create pretty much we can abstract the elements, and we can pretty much create any kind of simulation. And we can automate this stuff, and we can run it over and over and over again. And that's really the requirement for doing any kind of assessment, is that you can control enough of the elements, and that you can put enough run enough simulations to start to apply some math. And that's what we don't have right now. So let's look at some expressions of the objects. So in this first section up here, basically taken, we're going to have an object type. It's a node, so it can be it has required attributes and it has optional attributes. So in this node, required attributes, they all need a name, and it's going to act as either a host or a gateway. It's going to have an operating system, regardless. There'll be interfaces. Those interfaces will typically have some type of addressing or a unique identifier in order for them to communicate potentially on a network. There will be routing tables, etc. Optional attributes here could be their accounts, their applications. There might be artifacts embedded or running services. Now, if we take that down into another level, this would be maybe the human-friendly way to describe an object. Now we want to get a little bit more detail in there to really express more context so that we can start figuring out how this element will live in the universe that we're creating. So we'll put an object ID. That needs to be a unique identifier. In this case, we'll use 11001. We have the object type is a node. We can give it a nickname or an alias. So we'll call this one HackMe. It's running in host mode. It's running on Windows XP. So as we start to fill in the blanks, we can actually start to build this in a virtual environment, or build the system itself. We'll talk about which ports are listening, what services are running on those ports. And once we have that, we can then further abstract it to something that's more machine-friendly, that might look like YAML or some other type of scripting language, and we can convert it to this. Now, these abstraction layers are important because this is what allows us to transfer simulations from different platforms, but also, if you're teaching novices, maybe it's really important to teach them this concept, or we just describe the environment using these types of primitives. But if we want to automate it to get scale, we need to convert it to something that's machine readable. And so this gives us, I think, a pretty nice demarc. And this is just one example. So I'm going to tell you a bedtime story, and it's all about the stories and simulations. So to make these simulations fun and immersive, we want to put some context around it. This is what makes it real for the human actor. So we'll just say, in this particular snippet here has everything you need to build a simulation. So your mission is to identify your adversary's security posture by enumerating the attack surface represented by their external network address, which is a 10x network with a 24-bit mask. You must submit your findings by 1700 today, 1 hour from now. So if I were looking through here, and some primitives, and I know you just saw this. What's the constraint in here? Anybody see the constraint? Well, that's more of an objective. So your objective is going to be to identify your adversary security posture. Now, we don't know who the adversary is, but we've been given the attack surface, which is that 10x network, their external attack surface. You have to submit your findings, so you basically have 1 hour to do this. And in the simulations that we run, capture the flag games, the one thing I always had a problem with capture the flag games, and I used to play them a lot, nobody really cares about the flag. They always try to attack the scoreboard or the platform. And so one of the things about this simulation that we can do, unless your platform is, air gapped and then you don't get as much telemetry, it's very difficult. Constraints are how I can manage a lot of the participants' behavior. Because by putting an hour to, identify attack surface, that's a very real constraint. It also means you can start on time and end on time, most of the time. What about, let's see, what other kind of primitives here? Well, I guess I've got a network object here that I could define. Attack surface external network. I don't know who they are, but I've got an adversary. So at least there's me or my team and some adversary yet to be named. Enumerating attack surface, external networks. So I could also maybe start in my mind to see that there's an external network and there's an internal network. So you can infer a lot from this. And depending on how much content or context you want to build into it, you could build a very simple scenario, or you could make this, based on the scenario itself, you can make it a very detailed simulation. Which kind of leads me into the way we run packet wars. So we call it edutainment, and it's basically tries to take something that's very entertaining and make it educational. And it's such an important aspect, especially for, I would say just for people just starting out, it's super important to make it accessible. And a lot of your challenges aren't, how well you can write plugins for Metasploit, or if you know all of the switches for InMap and the command line. But it's really that you think, and if you create a rich scenario, it will be fun. And it is serious fun, because these skills that you're learning will help you as a cyber defender or offensive computing, or I've heard the term now purple teams, where you have to kind of do both. So I I like that. I think this is the first cyber sport, and what we originally, the rationale for doing this was it was going to be sponsor driven. We would have something like big time wrestling meets Formula One. So where you could get sponsors that would pay for the venues to do it. We run these events at hacker conferences. I have my own conference we run it at. We travel around the world doing it. But it's also for corporate team building, and as you might imagine, also for cyber assessments. So we'll actually come in and run very specific simulations that have an objective to figure out which of these 100 candidates are in the top 10%. And there's a lot of research. Anybody know about SIBRs, Small Business Innovative Research Grants that the government gives out? EduRange, have you guys heard of those? I mean, there is lots of investment going on in this space right now. And the problem is, it's pockets of investment. And all the great stuff that's created in one environment that might be classified, there's certain elements in there that wouldn't be. Like the simulation, the scenario itself might not be. Or the scenario it might be, and the platform they're using could be generic. And we have the ability, we'll talk a little bit about building those environments yourself. So it's about 20 years plus, and this came out of a frustration of me playing games. How many played Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, so my role, I'm the packet master, dungeon master, and the problem was that you could only go to games or do it in your own basement, as opposed to being able to meet up like a sport where you could just find some people that want to play, go find a field and go do this. So the real objective is to eventually get enough of a community where it's a sport and people are playing it, and maybe it's spectator friendly, which sometimes it isn't. I mean, you can only do so many fast cuts from people doing, looking hunched over their computers. So the visualization aspect, trying to make it accessible to people, that's one of the things that we've really been working on. And I think we're getting there. It all comes from the Cold War roots where, I grew up on this kind of stuff, and there's just a plethora of great ideas out there. And I think people are like, who would do that? And that's impossible. So, once people see this in action, or once an executive sits down and plays one of these simulations, they find out that it's not impossible. It can also be a tool for not fear-mongering, but for educating, and then you can have a real dialogue. Yeah, it's possible, but it's not as likely as this thing over here. And I found that it's really helped us. In some of my previous companies, it broke down a lot of barriers by getting people hands on keyboards and seeing it, but only with the context. They're not going to really, wherever they're at in the maturity continuum, you can create a scenario that would help them. This particular one that we're referencing, this was one we did last year. Last year was all about SCADA on wheels or connected cars. And so we have a big game that we play at Troopers. I don't know if anybody's been to Troopers. It's a conference in Heidelberg, but we always have the Packet Wars battle there. And we played in a castle this year, which was pretty cool, and we played it on boats before. So again, gets different people together. They learn, they understand that we're not necessarily people to be feared, but people to be hung out with. And it's a flexible platform, so you can learn more about it at packetwars.com. I also have some scenarios, so when we do a simulation or scenario, we'll retire that scenario, we won't play it again, and then those battle briefings are available and the diagrams are available. So if there's anybody that wants to, and we're trying to get a repository, we kind of call it the Players Club, but where people could build this community where we can upload simulations, bring all the different simulations together, and like there's a whole Crack Me scene, get those guys linked up, and things of that nature. But the platform is very flexible. So originally, when we were running these games, we would drop ship, they were crash carts, basically mobile racks, $1,500 to ship it, $1,500 to ship it back. The boxes would show up, inevitably something would be broken. Much like our experience here, we'd have people delayed, waiting to play, and we've now got it down to where we can run these in clouds, or we can run them. My platform of choice right now is a Mac Mini with 8 gig, and we use virtual images. And so those virtual images can be available. So if there's anybody that's interested in running their own games, doing it, building up a team, maybe some ideas on how you could finance or talk to sponsors to get equipment or opportunities to play, please get with me. I can help with that, I think. And that's kind of what segues into this. If you want to play games, work backwards from the objectives and constraints. So if you're having a conference, we were just at Virgil Baduva's 614 Con, and the constraints that I have, I'm the last person to go on at 7, and everybody's, it's held in a brewery, so I'm going to be dealing with lots of drunk people, and you can't come in and set up. And there's nothing wrong with hacking drunk and with lots of music. That's the way I used to do it. But you can't put down gaffer's tape and things like that because they have to reconfigure the whole space at 6 o'clock. And so what we did in this one is we went with RF. So we did a wireless challenge. Now, you might imagine what the problem would be with doing a wireless challenge at a hacker conference. Right. All you need is a car battery and an antenna, and there's no wireless. So that's not how we would do a normal large con because you really can't trust people to play nice. But we put a special prohibition. So anybody that's detected doing any kind of RF attacks, their team is disqualified. So that's worked well a couple times. So that's one constraint of the physical environment that you're playing in. The objectives for this particular battle were pretty simple. The other constraint was we only had 2 hours to do this, and we typically we play 3 battles normally, so we only could play 2 battles. And the objectives were basically to have fun and to really introduce this year's theme, which is hiding from robots or the Internet of Deadly Things. And so we had a battle called Time Lords, which was pretty cool. Basically, the scenario is, and these have battle briefings. So again, we're having fun with it. Battle briefing is, your team of Time Lords has been contracted to go back and eliminate a threat to the future, which is basically somebody builds something like Skynet or the Matrix. And it's Jim Beam, or Tom Beam, Jim's brother. You need to make sure he misses this appointment with Google, so he doesn't get his job, and then the world doesn't come to an end. And in that particular, with that working backwards from that scenario, it basically had to get to his alarm clock, which was in his home network, and there's lots of different attack paths. One of the important things is, we know the attack paths. Now, we don't know all the attack paths, and every once in a while, somebody will do something that's very unique and novel. I had one guy say, we're never going to drop a 0 day on you in one of these games. And I said, I don't care, but if you do, we'll have it because we have total telemetry. So we basically monitor the entire environment. What that lets us do is replay and look at, we do post-mortems. So we'll actually look at, what was done, how it was done. It also gives us the ability to do really cool visualization. I call it eye candy. So that is some of the really good things to get people who, I'm not techie, I don't have anything to offer, I don't want to be a part of this. But when they see the visualization, and that's the thing the ghetto hackers did. I don't know if anybody saw the original Keisha Girl, but their concept was, it was a stock market, and they would have this little, commercials in between that would, talk to how this corporation's doing against another corporation. Just super immersive. It made it real for people. It made it very accessible, and it made it fun. So that's really what we're trying to do with some of the visualization. And the analytics side, the more and more of this data you get, again, one of our goals is to be able to use this as, bless you, one of these, up here I just want to go like this, to be able to repeat these so that we can learn and improve the games ourselves. In the game space, we call it battle space, so everything that happens in the battle space should be viewable. And we have dedicated, so we used to drop those boxes off, then we virtualized it. We can now actually run these in the cloud, and we can spin these up dynamically. So we've got the ability now to almost pull a handle and have it spin up a simulation that has never ever existed, but will have the same objectives and constraints. Now that means you can play the same game over and over, and then we can learn about you and how well you're progressing, or we can run it the same way simultaneously against 1,000 combatants. And that's the unique thing that the simulation definition language concept. And I'm really looking for anybody that wants to start adopting that, or trading games, trading simulations. That's kind of where we want to go to build the community, because everything right now is very proprietary, and we kind of cannibalize each other's efforts in this. And at the end of the day, I want to play. I like being the packet master, but I never got to play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't get to play this many games anymore. So the simulations, if we get this critical mass, then maybe I'll come out of retirement and start playing again. We'll see if I still am as good as I think I am. Scoring and assessment, we talked a little bit about that. Our approach with the scoring is really all because people try to attack the scoring system. And it's a legitimate target. Anything that's not expressly prohibited is allowed, kind of just like in the real world. We don't allow physical attacks. We used to play in motels, I think, like Interzone, some of the conferences down south a long time ago, and people would cut our cables, which is a legitimate attack, and if you don't have anybody protecting your physical stuff. But we try to limit some of those just to make sure that it can be enjoyable for everybody. Because nothing's worse than starting the game and then having to restart it, and people just decide to drink and party instead. So you can learn more about Packet Wars. This was a cool one that we did called Pwn the Drone. So we actually had a command and control to take over the drone, and you had to fly it back to your base. You got to be careful. This one, it was a fun one, and we progressed that. Black files was basically some stolen data. Your artifacts were in there. You need to find the source of the leak. You see where this stuff comes. We're being influenced by real-world scenarios. We do red and blue team training. So any simulation, you're just kind of limited by your imagination, and working backwards from your objectives and your constraints is the method that we use. Next public event will be in Dayton in October at Daycon. Like I said, it's going to be about hiding from robots, which sounds weird, but you know, robots are everywhere. We have automatons that are running. We're giving them mobility. We're giving them communications. We're arming them. So I think this is going to be very relevant. And you can imagine the kind of cool scenarios that you're going to be able to put together. So I encourage everybody. The 2 days at Daycon there's 2 days that are private, invitation only. But on October 16th, it's public. So I encourage you, if you're in the area, come to Dayton and watch some Cyber Warriors. Probably veterans and some noobs, you know, playing the simulation. And if you don't get to come, we always put videos together, so those will be available to download off Vimeo or something in the future. So that's about it for me. I think I've got kind of back on schedule. I'll open up for any questions, and hopefully I'll have answers. Yeah, the question was, is it only involved in live? For most part, it's the live events that we do, but I do have packs, and they're not posted yet, the whole idea. So I do have some simulations. We originally, when we were talking about doing this as a cyber sport, we had a commercial vision of franchises. So we would control the branding, we'd make sure you have everything, we'd train you on it. And if sometimes we do get, we have one partner, which is ER&W, the folks in Germany. So they run these on behalf of us. So there's not a lot of up there now, but I do have things I will share. And I just got contacted right before I came in that somebody's like, you know, I want to learn. We have Packet Wars Pro Shop in Dayton. We do boot camps. So for the non-commercial stuff, I've got a battle pack that I can give you or can share. It has 2 or 3 scenarios. It has the diagrams for the networks. It has the constraints, the flags and everything defined. And those are from old games. So yes, to answer your question, we have that. It's just not online yet. I mean, some of this is a labor of love, and maintaining a website, even though it seems like it should be easy, it takes work to do a good one. And maybe I can, so bfite at meshco.com. That would be one way to reach out, or we can talk afterwards. No other questions? All right, well, I appreciate your time, and you guys have a great con, and I'm going to go see some sessions myself. And we'll post because the white paper, I think, is something that is a good place to start, because it's got a lot of detail on how we do this, and I'll make sure that those links are available.